Hello and welcome to the British Dapper, and today we're talking about just-in-time looks for autumn 2025. So today is the first of a series of videos on autumn collections and things to consider for autumn 2025. And so first of all, let's dive right in and talk about what's up and coming in the trend side of 2025. So this year there's a real emphasis on earthy tones, those chocolate browns, caramels, fawn colours coming through, as well as greens. Greens are very prominent this year, olive greens specifically. But there are other tones with green that are also really making headway this year. So something to consider is that field jacket look, whether it's a dark green or a light green. Wouldn't advise you to go too far in the extreme of the green range, but in that middle comfort zone where we're talking about these sort of olive, light green tones or darker green, forest greens, another colour that's coming through this year. The textures and fabrics that are being used this year are a lot more thicker and more robust materials than we've previously seen. So quite thick wools being used in the jackets and also in the actual other items that are being worn. For example, coats are very chunky, thick woolen coats, as well as jumpers, for example. They are very robust cable knit jumpers, and mohair is being introduced again as well. Something else to consider that's coming through at the moment is those lighter neutral tones. So those fawn colours, those off-whites, creams are coming through. They are quite prominent at the moment, and they are really tying all these other colours together. But for a spark of interest or a pop of colour, surprisingly we're seeing the resurgence of pink coming through, even though we're talking about autumn. And with that, those raspberry notes are also coming through, for example in the ties or the pocket squares, or in some other version, for example a waistcoat or something like that, just to bring that pop of colour into an ensemble. So when we talk about those earthy tones, we're talking about deep browns, caramels, those olives, those rust colours, and mocha being another colour that comes through. Probably a little bit outside the spectrum, but mushroom is another colour that's coming through. That brown chestnutty colour is coming through as well. And these colours tend to give a warmth in the overall look of the ensemble, especially in the autumn months, and it ties those autumn colours together into your ensemble, whether it be casual or very informal or that semi-formal look you're going for. So with those greens that we were talking about earlier on, Loddon green is another one that's coming through very prominently in coats at the moment. So for example, where we would traditionally see quite a military cut, we're seeing single buttoned front Loddon full length coats. Very nice colour to use, but also light sage colours as well are coming through. And I think that's a very interesting colour to play with, especially in the earlier part of autumn. I think as you get more to the latter part of autumn, then we may be looking for a little bit more darker colours coming through for those winter months ahead of us. So interestingly, those pinks that we were talking about, traditionally pink's been very much a summer colour, or a colour that adds warmth to an ensemble, an overall look. Whereas this year it seems to be used more to highlight an ensemble. So it could be a hot pink or it could be a pale pink, but it is a way of drawing attention. So it might be in a jumper or something along those lines, but equally it could be in the shirt itself that really does draw the attention. and maybe notes of that pink in maybe the pocket square or the tie, along with some other colours, to actually give a little pop of colour there and draw the attention. It's interesting to see that raspberry as a colour is coming through as well. Now, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that this will be in the shirt or in the trousers, for example, but certainly in the tie and pocket square. It's a great colour. It really does draw the eye, especially when you've got a lot of other browns or light greens, pastel colours coming through. That pop of red really does draw the attention. Similarly, cobalt blue has been really quite a strong contender this year for a lot of people and a lot of designers using cobalt blue to draw the attention. So that might be in the shirt or an aspect in the tie to draw the eye. If it's a suit, cobalt blue is a really unusual colour for a suit, but it does draw the attention. And whilst we're talking about suits and blue, navy is always going to be there as a primary colour to use regardless of the season. So this year, particularly in the autumn period, we've seen the resurgence of navy blue and pinstripe being very prominent at the moment, and it's nice to see that that style of suit comes back into circulation. Along with other blue tones in a suit, it's a great look. Not to mention olive greens or those sage greens are great in a suit as well, in a more informal setting, but very, very prominent at the moment in the current autumn 2025 catalogue, if you like. So those neutral colours, believe it or not, we're talking about chocolate browns, caramels, or even greys. Now, grey is a great way of carrying all these other colours off. So, for example, a charcoal grey in the darker range through to a merle grey or a light grey really does draw those other colours together. For example, this has got a little bit of grey in here, so quite easily we could wear with this ensemble a grey pair of trousers and it would fit in really well with the overall look. So when it comes to the fabrics this year, we're talking about corduroy is really prominent at the moment, and those earthy tones, rust tones, really do make that a look that is really comfortable, warming to see and to also wear. But also we're seeing those shearling fabrics. So for example, that's where the sheepskin leather but also the wool is still attached. So we're looking at those flight jackets. They are really robust, really keep you warm. They're a great look for not only the autumn but also the winter period, and very effective at keeping you warm. So those sheepskin coats are starting to come back into the limelight, if you like. And it's not uncommon to see now coats at the moment being brought out where you've got a sheepskin collar addition to the overall wool fabric of the coat itself, and it gives you that extra cozy layer, if you like, but really does pack a punch visually as well because of the contrast between the sheepskin on the actual collar to the actual wool in the actual coat. So when it comes to tradition, the traditional looks are still very strong at the moment, and traditionally we would be looking at very formalised look, tweed jackets, suits even. This year we're looking at a more classic style with a twist. So whilst we're still looking at tweed, we are looking at a slightly different style. So maybe a little bit more tapered in the waist and much more, or an increase in the length of the jacket length altogether. More like a hacking style of jacket than the more modern, shorter version that we see. So there's a migration towards this slightly longer look in the jacket length, slightly more tailored in the arms and in the waist rather than a country traditional look. Suits are becoming a little bit longer in length as well, which is really good news for some people that have been disillusioned of late with the shorter length jackets, that bum freezer look that's been very common in the last 5 years. So now to get longer jackets, again a more traditional cut and a wider, slightly looser fit, more regular sort of look, and cut to the trouser. I think we've gone back a little bit in style to maybe the earlier part of the 80s. That look seems to be coming back more and more. And in fact, to be fair, a lot of people are quoting the fact we are going back to a similar style to the 50s and 60s for that traditional cut and look. Now, when it comes to outerwear, we're seeing a slight change and variation. So this year we are, like I said, seeing long coats being worn, very popular at the moment, and we are looking for that raglan style, a very simplified look rather than the military double-breasted style that we used to see with the trench coat side of it. Having said that, trench coats are still a very popular look to go for, but if we're looking purely from a fashion point of view, then they are going for a much more simplistic look, straightforward, straight line, simple cut, maybe a Winchester or something along those lines. With that though, we are seeing an increase in, for example, the velvet collar that goes on a traditional wool jacket. We're looking at tweed coming in the coat itself, whether that be Donegal tweed, where we're looking at a speckled effect, or we're actually looking at a check, a Glen check for example, in wool. But the prominent thing that seems to be standing out is these collars. So we're seeing velvet being introduced again, which is a very traditional way of a covert coat being worn and created to a modern audience, if you like. And as I mentioned earlier, we're also seeing those sheepskin collars being added to a traditional wool coat. And along with that, even some forms of fake fur being added as well to give it that much more wintry, softer, warm look to it. So something there, not necessarily to everybody's taste. I'm just reflecting what's out there in the market at the moment and what people are expecting to be the big draws in 2025. Now when it comes to jumpers and knitwear, then we're starting to see those shawled cardigans coming back, very thick chunky ones. But at the other extreme, we're also seeing very fine knitwear coming through as well in those traditional, actually round neck cardigans, and those colours are coming through, those cobalt blues, and also those traditional earthy tones, for example, those fawns, caramels, and chocolate colours as well, but also those fern greens and sage green is still a very popular colour for those jumpers being used, as well as the traditional navy blue ones. But we're seeing an increase in not only zip up cardigans, but also the patterns on the cardigans being used, or jumpers. And we've seen the resurgence of the fuzzy mohair jumpers and cardigans coming back with quite a bright pattern to them. And that's quite an interesting look, going back to those late 70s, early 80s when they were very popular at one stage. Something else I want to just mention about, touched on earlier on about outerwear and how things were changing about the actual collars and the style of wool coats. Something else that's creeping in is the use of leather again. So whilst we're looking at black leather jackets and coats being worn, we are also seeing those dark browns and tan colours coming through as well. And unusual to see, but we're now seeing an increase in popularity of those leather trench coats. So we're talking about a full length coat and probably in a trench coat style, and it's a really unusual look, but with the browns being used, very popular at the moment, and can be mixed with these other earthy tones to give you a really good look. Similarly, suede and leather safari jackets are being introduced into the market at the moment, and I think they'll be very popular because they're not only earthy browns but also olive colours as well coming through, and those Levat green suede colours are really effective. Finally, coming on to accessories. Now, when it comes to accessories, things like scarves and gloves, for example, well, with scarves at the moment, they're looking at quite a comedy look to the edges of the scarf. I wouldn't necessarily say that's the best look for somebody sartorially want to look their best, but from a casual, fun point of view, I can understand why it adds a little bit of colour, a little bit of texture to the overall look. Similarly, when it comes to gloves, we're looking at leather gloves, and those browns or olive greens are very popular at the moment, but also the ones where you have knitted sides to the actual glove with a leather palm to them. They are very popular at the moment as well, for an unusual look on a traditional style, if you like. Similarly, even balaclavas have made headlines at the moment. I wouldn't necessarily advise you to wear one of those, especially if you're wearing a suit or a tweed jacket or something like that. But it is out there, people are wearing them, and they are actually wearing them from a, I don't know if it's a fad thing at the moment, but certainly people are actually wearing them with suits. I think this is an off-spill from what we saw in the catwalks earlier in the year about certain designers were using a traditional look, and they were introducing the balaclava as maybe a statement, I'm not sure, but that seems to have caught on, and we're starting to see people actually wearing these things. And in the winter months, I can understand people would wear something like that. But again, from a sartorial point of view, I don't think it's a really good look. I think you're better off with a traditional scarf and maybe some form of headwear like a cap or hat would look much more sophisticated and much more polished. From a casual point of view, belts, whilst with a suit or underneath a jacket, you don't really see the belt. But if you are in a much more casual setting, maybe where you're wearing jeans or a pair of chinos or something along those lines, maybe with a jumper, then people are considering or using statement piece belts. So slightly bigger buckles, more decorative, and colours maybe changing as well, so you get quite an ornate design. I think that's quite popular at the moment, but again it is very much the casual end of a look. One of my all-time favourites is coming back into circulation, and this is the final bit of advice I'm going to give you, and that is duffel coats are back in style. So that traditional duffel coat look has come back on itself and is very popular in the autumn this year. So consider, if you haven't got one, is it worth adding one to your wardrobe? They last for decades. They're really well constructed. If you get the right one, they will last you a lifetime. And they keep their shape, and they're very, very good at keeping you warm. So it's something to consider there. So the next series of videos we're going to break down a little bit more of a look on different autumn ensembles and things to consider through the autumn period. So I just want to remind you that we have a Patreon page, and if you'd like to get involved, I'll put the link down below, and you can then have a look at what we have to offer on the Patreon page. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe, then please feel free to do so. We have a Buy Me a Coffee page, so if you'd like to make a contribution to the channel, then please feel free to do so. We also love constructive comments, so if you'd like to make some, jot them down below. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. And if you've got a question you'd like to pose to us, or you'd like an answer to, then why not jot it down? We'll try and answer your question for you. We also like ideas for future videos, so if you want to make a contribution and make a suggestion about future content, then please, again, jot it in the notes below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. The next video could be something that you've recommended or suggested. So until next time, take care.